There is a new tool, and this is actually one that the book, I believe, had to use quite often, and that's called the Object Selection Tool. And really, this tool has simplified a lot of these more complicated selections. And what it does is it basically looks for contrasts between what you're trying to select and what you're not trying to select. So for example, if you were following along with me here visually, I grabbed the Object Selection Tool. Literally, I just created a rectangle around the sand dollar. So it's even including all the red background and everything. But because there's such a high contrast between the sand dollar color and the edges versus the red background, when I release my mouse, Photoshop does the work for me. And obviously in this case, it does an excellent job. Doesn't always do an excellent job, but in this case it did. I'm gonna go down to this little seashell here down at the bottom and do the exact same thing. I've got the Object Selection Tool. I've got the new option pressed. I'm just gonna click, hold, and drag, basically making a square or rectangle. Release my mouse, let Photoshop do the work for me. Now notice in this particular case, not as accurate, right? It's actually included this white area inside the seashell, and it's also included this area as well. So in this case, I'm gonna have to do some fine tuning with another selection tool, or I try to use a different combination of tools. So it's not always perfect. Now, there is a variation with that tool that's unique to it. For example, you're gonna see something that says mode, and then it's got rectangle, or it has lasso. So again, all that is it allows you to adjust how the tool is gonna make the selection. It's still gonna then work its magic, and all it's looking for is the contrast between the edge of what you're trying to select and the area that you're not selecting. So in this case, even by switching the mode to the lasso instead of the rectangle, it still is including this white area inside the seashell. And that's because this white area is so close in color to the general seashell shape, it just can't recognize the difference. Now, the other tool that has been around for a little while, but it was also introduced 3 or 4 versions of softwares ago, and it also is very, very beneficial in simplifying the way it makes selections, is called the Quick Selection Tool. And again, that's hidden behind the Object Selection Tool. Quick Selection Tool. The Quick Selection Tool is a little bit unique compared to the other selection tools at this point. Notice it only has 3 options: either new selection, add to a selection, or subtract from a selection. There is no intersect. It's new, add, or subtract. The other thing you'll notice is you'll see a little white circle. Could have a soft edge or what looks kind of like a blurred edge, or it could have a crisp edge, just kind of depends on the last setting. And then you'll see a number underneath it. That's simply the size of this diameter that you're looking at. So notice the tool itself has a diameter. And so I can go up here and click on this little tick mark. That opens up what's called the size slider, which allows me to change the size of the diameter. Or it allows me to adjust the hardness value, which is the crispness of the edge of that tool. So hardness value of 100% means it's going to be a very crisp edge. A lower percentage means it's going to be a softer edge. Now, that doesn't have too much relevance with this selection tool, although it does start to go back into that concept of feathering that we briefly introduced, that we'll talk about at a different time as well. But in this case, I'm not really worried about the hardness factor. I'm more interested in the size of the diameter of the tool. Now, there is a keyboard shortcut that you can use as well on your keyboard. It's the bracket keys to the right of the letter P. So the bracket key furthest from the letter P will make the diameter larger. The bracket key closest to the letter P will reduce the size. And the biggest thing is you just want to pay attention to that plus sign that's inside of the diameter, because wherever you click, that's what it's looking for. And it's kind of looking for the pixel information, the contrast, all that kind of stuff. And you'll notice with this tool to select the sand dollar, pretty much one click, and it does about a 99% accuracy. If I come over here to this seashell and I click, does a pretty good job as well, although it starts to pick up a little bit of the background pattern right here and then right over here. So of course I would do some fine tuning with that, and I could use this tool and say subtract, or what I probably personally would do again is go back to the lasso tool, subtract from, and use the exact same technique I did on the sand dollar. So again, I would start outside of the actual selection, click, hold, and drag, be precise along the edge of the seashell, but then once I get outside of that area, I don't care what happens, because when I release my mouse, Photoshop will connect it for me. Okay, so it just kind of depends on personal preference, expertise, and how you work with it.